and welcome from First Presbyterian Church of Grange. I'm Sarah Sutton, and I've been a member of this church for most of my life. I'm also part of the Re-Emerging Church Task Force, a subset of elders charged with guiding us through this pandemic. This video is a roadmap describing the steps we should take for some of us to return to in-person worship services. The task force has spent a lot of time translating science and guidelines for our congregation. I have two main points to convey. First, we have learned so much about how this virus spreads. Keep safety first. Stay home if you're sick. Also, we know the virus could spread from people who feel well. Socially distance, wear masks, and wash hands. Second, please thoughtfully consider whether joining a group service is right for you. Until this pandemic is over, stay home if you or those in your household are at high risk of getting very sick from COVID. Someday soon, our doors will be open for all of us to gather. Meanwhile, the Lord is with you wherever you are. Thank you.
Hi, and welcome to the last of the videos of building use in the time of COVID-19 for First Presbyterian Church of Grange. We know that a number of fellowship groups and outside organizations are anxious to be able to use our facility again. And with limited precautions, we want to be able to make our building available to as many groups that are caring for people as we can possibly provide. Unfortunately, we don't know from one week to the next what the state guidelines for reopening interior spaces may be. And so we ask, before you guarantee the scheduling of any event, that you check with the church office and make sure that the room is still available based on the state of Illinois reopening guidelines that can be found through the Illinois Department of Health. Once you've confirmed that the room will be available, please pay attention to each of the guidelines because they're slightly different for every room. And in allowing ourselves to be careful in the way in which we use our space, our hope is that we will be healthy in how we share with one another. If you haven't had an opportunity to watch the video about worshiping at FPCLG, I encourage you to go back to the website and find the video about indoor and outdoor worship. Many of the aspects of our facility use are contained in that video, along with some basic principles about how to enter and exit the facility with maximum safety. Please know that no matter where you are in the facilities of FPCLG, we're going to ask you to wear a mask at all times, because we are not going to permit the serving of food or refreshment. The masks can remain on. If you bring your own hydration or water, certainly feel free to take a sip, but do not share, and replace your mask as quickly and as soon as possible. When you call and confirm your room use, ask the desk to remind you where to find the blue supply bin associated with the entry of the room that you have reserved. We have a number of these bins that are going to be placed at various entrances and will be restocked after each use. So be sure that you return all of the unused items into the bin and return the bin to the location where you initially found it. Every bin has the same supplies. Let's take a look at what they include. When you open your bin, it will contain sanitizing wipes, sometimes 1 or 2 containers, a box of new disposable masks for those who forget to bring their own masks, sanitizing spray and rags, and hand sanitizer for those who arrive to use upon their arrival. In addition, for those who are using the sanitizing spray and have sensitive skin, we do include some gloves. You can wear these for your protection or to protect your skin. Once you've confirmed that everything is in there, along with general prevention printed material. You will also find the COVID supply checklist, which is in the bin, a quarantine sheet. So if an individual falls ill, this sheet must be placed in the doorway of the room where they went. We'll talk about that later. Cancellation sign. You may use a grease or erasable pencil to post these signs at the doors in case at the last minute, as a result of change in guidelines or people having been exposed, an event is canceled. So this is your kit. We'll talk a little bit now how to use it. When you first arrive and find your kit, we ask that you wipe down all high-touch surfaces with the sanitizing wipe found in your container. We're not sure who may or may not have used the room before you and how long it's been, particularly on door handles and light switches, that space has been wiped down. So just quickly wipe off the high contact surfaces before you begin your event. Light switches and switch plates are another high contact, frequent use place. Wipe them lightly down with one of the sanitizing wipes. If your event involves the use of tables, we ask you to quickly wipe down hard surfaces where people have sat before you use the room, just as an extra precaution. Also, the hard grasp surfaces of any chairs that you are going to use could use a wipe down just for extra safety. Now, you're ready to start your event. Each room also has a designated quarantine space. The purpose of the quarantine space is that you have a secure area where if an individual falls ill during an event, you can zip them into that room and designated that that room needs to be deep cleaned for the possibility of COVID. We trust this never happens, but the CDC has encouraged places of worship and gathering to have a space that is nearby but can be cleaned and sealed off as quickly as possible for anyone who we, God forbid, displays symptoms of COVID once they've arrived for an event. So let me show you each of the quarantine areas related to the rooms and their usage. We're here in the narthex. If you're in the narthex or in the west cloister that sticks around to the left of when you come into the narthex, that is a gathering space. The total capacity for the gathering space of the narthex and the use of the west cloister is about 25 people for just seating. That doesn't include tables. Remember, whenever you add tables to a room, you reduce the amount of flow that people can experience, and so the capacity of that room drops relative to the square footage taken up by the furniture. So we're in the narthex. Let me show you where the quarantine room is for this space. The quarantine space for the sanctuary, as well as the use of the narthex and the west cloister, is in the basement down the east staircase. East is the side where the sanctuary has the pulpit. The east staircase that goes down to what is the bride's room in the church garden level. The quarantine space for the narthex, west cloister, and sanctuary is the space known as the bride's room. We do ask that you close the door. This is going to be the only time that I talk about limiting airflow in a room. Everywhere else, we want the airflow to be maximized. But if we have someone who we suspect has COVID, we want to make sure that the airflow out of that room is minimized. Once they've gone into that space, be sure that you leave at the door or on the floor immediately in front of the door this cautionary sign that allows us to know that that room needs to be deeply sanitized. When help for the individual arrives, make sure that you leave on your mask at all times. If you need to call 911 for ambulance assistance, allow the trained paramedics and the EMTs to be able to come to the individual who is in distress. If they've merely simply requested for a ride from home, meet the individual that is giving them the ride at the door, bring them to the door, allow them to go in to get their loved ones, and make sure that you sanitize and close the door behind once the individual has departed. I'm now here in Fellowship Hall, our largest gathering room at First Presbyterian Church of LaGrange. Unfortunately, it's not available for use right now because we're in the process of repairing several patches on the floor, and it won't be available for a few more weeks. I'm recording this the first week of October. If it's now into November, the likelihood is that this room will be available for use. But please check with the church office before you have the expectation of using our fellowship hall. This room is designated for 50 for capacity. Again, if you're using tables, that reduces the capacity of the room. Check with the church office to figure out how many tables and how much that will affect the use of fellowship hall based on the amount of square footage that are available. The quarantine room for fellowship is that same bride's washroom. When you're facing the stage, it is the room to the left of the stage as you exit fellowship hall. Immediately to your left is the bride's room, which is the quarantine space for our fellowship hall. Airflow is extremely important, and we ask that before you arrive, you check with the office to make sure that the air handlers for this room are turned on. They actually create the flow of ventilation here in the fellowship hall. There's one on the west side, there's one on the east side in the closets. Make sure that you've checked to see if those are turned on for maximum airflow in the use of this room. When you arrive in the fellowship hall, how will you know if the air handlers are on? Well, if you go to the little side closet here, you'll be able to hear it. Of course, one of the wonderful things about Fellowship Hall is its incredible commercial grade kitchen. Unfortunately, no serving of food. You can bring your own beverage. If you need to bring a small snack for yourself and just yourself, you remove your mask briefly to be able to take hydration or a little nibble. That's okay, but food draws crowds. Crowds draw people together, and as we come together, our capacity to violate safe social distance completely deteriorates. And so, for the meantime, we're going to ask that you not use the kitchen in any way. Let me show you one more thing about the use of Fellowship Hall. As people arrive in Fellowship Hall, they'll be coming through this door. It is the one that connects with our Ashland Education Building, and that way off to the door to the parking lot. The temptation is to congregate in and around this door for people to come and greet. You need to make sure that people don't bunch up in the entry. Encourage them to flow as far as they need into the rest of the space so that as other guests arrive, they can maintain 6-foot safe social distance. Have hand sanitizer that is in your container available as soon as they walk in. And then when you're done with your event, same principle. Invite people to leave in an orderly fashion, maybe dismissing them in family groups one at a time so that they can also depart maintaining safe social distance as they leave the fellowship hall and return to their vehicles or return to their walk home. Again, as you depart, using the sanitized spray, wipe down all high-touch surfaces before you depart, and then be on your way. Just a quick word about washrooms. None of our bathrooms are big enough to allow for safe social distance for more than one person at a time. And so we ask single file for the use of the washrooms. There is a sign on the door that says either available or occupied. Please turn the sign around when you use the washroom, and when you leave, return the sign to let people know it's available. The exception for one person at a time in the washroom is if you have an individual who is a young child or someone who needs assistance in the washroom, then one attendant could be there with them in order for them to be able to safely use the washroom. And remember, as always, when you're done, wash your hands. Thank you. Hi, we're now in Westminster Fellowship Hall. our other larger gathering space. This room can hold 20 at safe social distancing, and we ask that you use the Catherine entrance exclusively for entrance and egress from the space. We also ask that you leave the doors open to the Catherine entrance and the doors open to the cloister hallway and off to the hallway towards the handicap entrance. And if at all possible, to open the windows, turn on the air conditioner fans, and maximize the circulation of air. As it gets colder, there may be some limits as to how many windows you can have open, but the more airflow we have, the less likely the aerosols from someone shedding COVID is going to affect others in the room. The quarantine room for this is the nursery. We're not currently permitting people to participate who are under the age of 2, and so we're not currently using the nursery space as an active child care facility. If someone begins to exhibit symptoms of COVID, please bring them to the nursery. If they're in the front of a sanctuary event, you may use this nursery space, and certainly if you're in Westminster Hall, that would be the quarantine room. Again, minimize airflow contact within that room, close the doors, and leave the sign that says the room has been contaminated so we can deeply sanitize it after the individual who has left. One more concern about contact tracing. What happens if someone calls and says they were at an event at FPCLG and they have now tested positive for COVID? Well, they will be asked to give their contacts or the events that they have attended so that the Department of Public Health can contact trace any who had come in contact with that person who is now COVID positive and tell them to isolate themselves for 14 days or until they have had a conclusive negative test before they enter back out into the world. We help with that contact tracing by asking you as an outside group to maintain attendance records for every event at First Presbyterian Church of LaGrange for 14 days after the event. You don't need to keep it longer than that, but for 14 days after the event, please make sure that you have the name of every attendee and a way to get a hold of them, either by phone or email address, so that if in the unfortunate event that someone is testing positive who was in attendance, we might contact trace and minimize the spread so that more are not infected. Your sheet will contain a contact list where you can write in names. If you are an inside user of FPCLG, we ask that the moderator of the group, be it a small group or a youth leader, maintain the contact tracing and turn that information in to the office so that if the church office is contacted, we might be able to share that information with the Department of Public Health for contact tracing. Make sure you have a name. Make sure you have some contact by way of email or better yet, cell phone. If they're active members of the church and their information is on file with the church office, we do only need their names, but make sure that information is current. Of course, one of our favorite gathering spaces is our church parlor. And the room is big enough to be able to hold just under 20 individuals at safe social distancing, even with the furniture that's in here. The problem with the parlor is that it's got so few hard surfaces to clean. Everything is upholstered, and that's incredibly difficult to sanitize. And so we've made the temporary decision to say that we will not have groups gathering in the parlor because it is almost impossible to guarantee the sanitization of the surfaces where people sit. That may change, but if you are in the parlor, we ask that it only be 1 or 2 individuals, light conversation, windows open as much as possible, doors open as much as possible, maximize the air circulation, but no gathered groups, just very, very small 2- and 3-person conversations are happening in the parlor. Make sure that you check with the office, however, before you use the parlor, because we want to space enough time between each gathering so as to make sure that it is safe as is reasonably possible. So there you have it, a guide to the use of the space here at First Presbyterian Church of LaGrange. You will receive a sheet of information when you reserve the space, and every event needs to have a primary contact individual who agrees to abide by these rules and to assist their group to follow them as best as is possible. The right to use a room can be revoked at any time, and may happen if the Illinois Department of Public Health deems that certain sizes of gatherings are not, for an interim period, safe once again. Please work with us. It might be frustrating and even disappointing to have to face a cancellation or the removal of permission, but we are working our very, very best to make sure that you are safe. It's far more important that we get to see you in the years ahead healthy and joyful than just in the next few months where risks are high. So take care of yourself, and in so much as you can, take care of one or two other people too. God bless you. You are in our prayers. Amen. Again, as with use of all of the spaces, be sure to sanitize all high-touch surfaces with sanitizer and sanitizing wipes.